live on the air, and we have Steven Bupp. And we've
Hey,
actually talked to you before because you're in the band Sex with Rollercoasters, but now you've got a solo project.
that's me.
Yeah, and we're just going to get a couple things out of the way because now that we do this video podcast, we are starting to get sponsors. And you might see up here on a corner what our sponsor, but we're going to actually put up something so you can actually see a little bit bigger. The sponsor, it's called Double Jack Online. They're out of Germany. If you take your cell phone and scan that, they do philanthropic uh, lotteries. So you're going to go and play Keno, you can play Powerball, and then a percentage of profit goes to charity. And so you can check that out. We'll put up the banner for a second so people can see that. So you can either scan that with your phone or use the link we have down here. And now we'll just have that for a couple more seconds because they are the sponsor. And then we'll get into the interview. We're going to talk about the chiptune album from Steven Bupp. So we'll get this off the air now. and then get back our Phantom logo because everybody wants to see Phantom. Yeah, there's the Phantom logo.
For sure.
So, yeah, this year's been kind of weird. And, people are starting to figure out different things, and it's cool. I mean, I was talking to you, and it's like, wow. It's like I see you out there. I was like, oh yeah, you're from Sex with Rollercoasters, and now you actually have a very unique project that's totally different than what you did in the band.
Thank you. Yeah. I've you've known me from Sex With Rollercoasters. I've been in that band for years. I've been playing rock and roll music for years, namely guitar and just doing like punk rock stuff since I was like a teenager. But unfortunately, we couldn't meet up because of all the things happening. But I want to continue to make music, and I didn't want to just make more rock music because that's what the band's for.
Yeah.
So I just started making. I just picked some stuff I thought was cool and just started making weird chiptune video game music.
Well, there's one thing I've always noticed because like the video game industry is kind of competing with like the same fans that used to buy music, right? They're totally engaged with
Sure.
YouTubers, watching Dashy or whatever. They're on there playing, all the games, and gamers are kind of ruling everything. So do you have a love for video games or that kind of chiptune type of sound, or from that kind of old school gaming, or was this an idea for the sound for the music?
Well, this is the second album I've released under my own name. My first album was like straight up music that I made with the Sega Genesis, just because I wanted to do something that that reminded me of like kind of like what I used to do for fun, like growing up. I just picked the coolest sounds that I had. So when I made this album, An Opera of Knives, I want to continue that, and so I wanted to use a Game Boy, get those real like crunchy 8-bit sounds.
Oh wow! So the first album was the Genesis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a Genesis, I had a Dreamcast, and I had a Saturn, and I totally was in love with the Saturn.
For sure.
I was like, oh, I was like a big like I didn't like it when PlayStation came because I was like, I hated how Sega got kind of wiped out. Because I really thought that the Saturn and the Dreamcast were really good systems, and they just didn't get the chance.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure what happened there, but
yeah, I'm always rooting for the underdogs. So I'm like, sure. I like Knights.
Yeah.
It's like nobody else likes Knights. It's like, well, I like it, but but yeah, that's interesting. So we actually want to have people listen to the title track. So we're gonna bring that up so we can do that here.
For sure.
And we're gonna bring up the song and we'll put you on mute, and we're actually gonna play the whole thing. We don't care if we get the strike because we're not about that. But we don't get a strike, but they tell us, oh, we can't monetize. Well, we get money from other things, so we don't care.
That's okay.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna play Opera of Knives. That's the title track for the record, and we're gonna give you a good picture of it, and then we're gonna talk more about the whole record and the project. So that's cool. We're gonna start that now. We'll put you on mute once we start it.
Right on.
Here we go.
Visions blur, foundations lay, the future grows beneath the waves. And when the past began to change, the centuries looked the other way. Lost in the heart, lost in your smile, lost in your gaze. I love you, child, all your days.
So that's the title track, An Opera of Knives from Steven Bupp. And when we get back to our main view so everybody can see where we are. So that what's cool about that song is, like I said, is like it's interesting because I kind of felt like a little bit of a Pink Floyd vibe, a little bit from the early Floyd, but then at the end I kind of heard a little bit of like PIL.
Okay.
The Public Image Limited. You kind of channeled a little kind of Johnny Lydon at the end. It kind of reminded me of like a Public Image Limited, like from Metal Box or something.
Sure.
But yeah, it is. Well, you know, people might not know my strange references because I listen to all kinds of weird music. But like Sid Barrett, Pink Floyd. I'm not talking about the big, you know, expansive Pink Floyd.
Sure,
More
sure.
like the original Pink Floyd. But so like the whole project is very different than what people would know of you from Sex with Rollercoasters.
For sure.
And you had done a previous album that we had talked about. But this one, again, you maybe talk about the focus and how you put it together and the instrumentation. It's like, because you're the single producer on this whole thing. You're primary songwriter and producer for this whole project, right?
Sure. Yeah. I did absolutely everything from, you know, arranging and recording, mixing, mastering. I did all that stuff. Most of it, like I said, I really wanted to with this project, my main focus was like, I wanted to expand, but also shrink from the previous album. So I went with the Game Boy. That was my main start. And I'm using something called an LSDJ, which is a program that you can actually flash onto one of these USB carts.
Cool.
And that has a tracker in here. So it's got like a list of stuff, and you literally put stuff on the list, and it uses the actual Game Boy sounds, which, you know, you can just put right into your computer or whatever. So I wrote all the songs as sort of like a sketch using that, and slowly pulled stuff out to use like actual orchestral instrumentation to take those places.
Yeah, it sounds like mellotrons and stuff like that, you know. But like orchestral pads, like what you could get off of like a D50 or like a JD800 or something. But you know, I'm going into my synth head stuff. But but yeah, it's just I like the direction because I'm a synth head, right? So I'm a total like hardware synth guy. I'm always like talking about Jupiter 8s and 106s and Moogs and
right,
Prophet 5s and Oberheimers. But like it's cool when I see somebody, you know, you're a guitar player, right?
Primarily, yeah.
Yeah. I always think it's really interesting how guitar players approach like synth type music. You know, it goes back to even like Pete Townsend. like his approach to synthesizers. He's known in even organs, like Hammond organs,
Right.
is like in the synth world. He's like one of the best players
Sure.
because the way he came at it is not what Keith Emerson did. Right. It's
Right.
not what Stevie Winwood did. It's not what Stevie Wonder did. He came at it from a totally different way. And it's kind of like a very modular way. Like kind of what people do today. He was doing like with Bob O'Reilly and,
Right.
you know, the stuff he did with the ARP 2600 on relay
For sure.
and won't get, and Who Are You? So yeah, it's just interesting to hear your approach with the chiptune, which is kind of a, you know, is a very underground kind of thing.
Right.
But the way you did it is just really interesting. Maybe talk more to.
I never really came to the table as being like a chiptune artist, but you know, obviously I'm using a lot of chiptune hardware and stuff, and that whole community, like those people are mostly wonderful. They've accepted me and just, you know, are always promoting each other's stuff or promoting my stuff. It's a real cool community. Like I said, I started with the Game Boy, and I'm more of a producer or a songwriter that, like, I hear stuff in my head. I'm not really like a play stuff and let stuff happen type of guy. So yeah, like sometimes, because, like, you know, guitar is my first language. Sometimes I'll have something in my head and I'll have to play it on guitar to know what notes to put into the synth or into the Game Boy or into something else.
Well, I think that's what I think I said that I think that approach sometimes causes things to happen that a keyboard player won't do, right? Because we're taught as a keyboard player, if you're like, you know, I think one of the cool things is when you come from a different instrument and you tried something else, like if you get a sax player and he jumps on a guitar.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And then it's like he's trying to phrase like his sax.
Right. Yeah. He's trying to play saxophone with his fingers.
Yeah. It's always really cool because I think they could even like synthesizer players. The way we think traditionally is we have to try to get in the head of the instrument we're trying to replicate.
Right.
So if I'm playing a sax, I shouldn't play endlessly because I should be taking breaths.
Right.
If I'm trying to play drums, I should try to think like a drummer and actually listen to drum tracks to try to pick up how a drummer should play.
Absolutely.
If I play a bass, I should try to think about like how a bass player plays. And so like the cool thing about if you're a synthesist, you're trying to like replicate other instruments like all the time. That's what we do.
Right.
But when you come into something like a chiptune, it's kind of like a feel. It's like a genre. So did you actually have to consult with anybody to kind of get into it, or you kind of just discovered it on your own?
To actually learn how to utilize the hardware, I watched tons and tons and tons of tutorials and stuff, because it's not intuitive. You kind of have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
There is an experimental process to get some of those like cooler sounds. The Game Boy is pretty interesting. It's got 4 channels. It's got 2 square wave channels that are just straight 8-bit noises. But then it's got a wave channel, which is like very, very primitive synthesis. So you can actually kind of like change the wave. You can pick saw, you can pick square, sine, and manipulate it that way.
Okay, like a wavetable, maybe.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
That's interesting. I didn't know that had that.
Yeah. It's just that one channel. You can that channel actually has 2 purposes. You can either utilize it as a wavetable, or it can do like very, very small sampling.
Oh, that's cool. Like PCM samples, like would have been like a D50 or tiny.
They're
minuscule.
4-bit at best, so they're like super distorted. But like, I mean, that's kind of the charm, right?
Yeah, it's what you're looking for. Like if you're trying to pull 2600 sounds, like super basic, you know.
Right. Yeah, it's ultra rudimentary.
Yeah. Once you get into these old game systems, like, oh, I want to try to pull like something from Intellivision or ColecoVision.
Yeah.
Showing my age, because I actually grew up with those when I was a kid, and I could pick a 2600 or ColecoVision or Intellivision, and like everybody, I said 2600 because I look better to me. But you know, I don't know. But
my first system was the Sega Genesis, which is why I started with that. My first album.
That's awesome. I mean, I actually was one of those kids that was crazy because we like, you can play Space Invaders at home. And I was like an arcade kid, and that's
right.
you know. And I mean, I'm a child of the '70s, so I would go to the arcade and be playing Asteroids, and then we hear, oh, you're gonna be able to play Asteroids at home, and like what? And we were like, everybody was like telling their parents, like, that's what I want.
Yeah,
That's what
for
I
sure.
want. And so I got that was the first game I ever had. First, games. This goes the one, it's like I said, there was in television was out there. We were like, what's that? It had got this circle controller. And like, what is
Right.
this
Yeah.
thing?
It's
Like,
real wild.
I don't know what that is. but yeah, this is a really wild song. The way it you can hear the initial part is very chiptune, and then you bring in this orchestration, and then you have like that choir. Can you talk about like how did you create that choir of voices?
The whole album is just kind of like a mixture of tons and tons and stuff. The vocal effects that I'm doing, especially for like those bigger choir stuff, there's a couple of songs that use it. It's literally like 50 versions of my own voice just layered on top of each
Layered on
other.
top of each other. Oh, kind of like Hendrixian, because the Hendrix used to did that, where he just layered like an orchestra of guitars on the
Right.
studio version of the Star Spangled Banner, which I don't know if everybody's ever heard the studio version, not the Woodstock version. The studio version, he actually worked with Les Paul, and he overdubbed his guitar like 50 times,
Oh, that's awesome.
and it's in different keys, and it sounds like, if you've ever heard it, it sounds like Rainbow Bridge.
Wow.
If anybody wants to find it, but everybody knows about the Woodstock version. But
Right.
what it has in common is what you just said, that you layered your voice and you created this orchestra of your voice, like this choir. Even if you think about if you did that with a guitar with a guy like Hendrix, it sounds like this, like a bunch of like a whole orchestra of Hendrix.
Yeah. So it's mostly my own voice, but to get some of those like more rich like lower male tones or like the higher female stuff, I invested in a vocal synth.
Vocal synth, you ran it through that.
So it's my voice on top, and then in the middle is this vocal synth that plays choir sounds, and you can play the notes with one hand, and on the other hand you can choose vowel sounds.
Oh, cool.
So they're actually like kind of singing what I'm singing, just minus the consonants.
It's kind of like the old Mellotrons used to have like vocal choirs on Mellotrons, where people would like run the old tape-based Mellotrons.
It's like an ultra modern version of that. Yeah.
I use, to create Josephine Electric, if anybody knows me, I use a Vt3 or a Vt4 Vocal Transformer from Roland, and it does what you just said. I can actually, my voice is, when it's Josephine, is pitched to a soprano.
Right, like formant change.
Yeah, and it does it in real time. And I usually run a form on it, and I run effects on it. Like I run like a bunch of other things besides that, but it just creates her in real time.
Sure.
And it's always, I've always been very interested in vocoders, even going back to the old Moog 16 channel vocoder that used to be in the 70s. It was like phenomenal. That it's a bear. I think costs like $5,000. but yeah, it's just I'm a big proponent of using it to create characters, like the way you're using. A lot of people use them to just stay like auto tune, but when you use them to create the kind of situation you did, I think that's kind of what I think they should be used for.
For sure, yeah,
because it's more creative than just kind of, you can burn people out if you just use them the way you hear it a lot.
Sure, yeah, depends on what you're in the mood to listen to.
Yeah, it just becomes like, oh, I heard that how many times? Somebody trying to sing when I know they can't sing.
Yeah.
Not to put down people, but so like this album is this something that you said you did a first album that was more like the Sega Genesis, and this is off of the Game Boy. Are you thinking to continue that with like a different game system for like the next?
That was never really I don't really know what's next, to be honest. This album took just about an entire year to make. I really had a strong vision for this one. I knew that I kind of wanted to do that sort of like ultra gothic kind of like, it's not really church music because it sounds kind of demented, but that like big choirs, big
yeah, it's got a progressive stuff. It's kind of got this progressive thing, like if you like early like Peter Gabriel Genesis,
sure,
or like Yes, like early Yes. And I'm a big fan of like progressive rock, listening to like anything that's kind of in that mixing fusion and funk and orchestral stuff with like hard rock and psychedelic rock. That's where my headspace is most of the time. That's what the ghost stuff is trying to do.
Sure.
um but yeah, so I totally get where you're going, because it's a kind of a hybrid, because you've got this kind of like psychedelic aspect, kind of Beatlesque, orchestral stuff, but then it's strange, kind of like Sid Barrett psychedelia a little
Thanks.
bit. It seems to have it. I just pick it up, and then I heard a little Johnny Lydon, like I said, like pill in it at the end. At least that's what my ear heard. But that's my interpretation. But what I end up at the end of the day is like that's a cool mixture, because it's different. Like I can hear influences, but you're doing it with your stamp.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't necessarily know what my own flavor is, but I kind of feel like if you were to listen to my stuff, you could tell that I had my hands in it, regardless of what it was.
Yeah. I mean, it's you. It's you, but you can, like, I always like hear influences, or I like interpret influences, but I do love the reason I talk to independent people like yourself or indie musicians is because of the venture that you are willing to actually do something different, which is why I like to talk to people like yourself, because there's a lot of stuff out today where everybody wants to go to the same 10 producers and do the same type of thing. And even like even if you could have been in, just done another replication of what you already do in your band,
That's
which is like the safer thing to do. And business people probably would say, well, why don't you just do that? but it's like, as an artist, you felt like it maybe explain to the audience, like for people who know what you do in Sex with Rollercoasters, like why you chose not to do that.
Like I said, I've been in Sex With Rollercoasters for years and years and years. We started that band in 2006, so whatever the math is, 15 years, something like that. And we were doing that pop punk, psychedelic punk type stuff, and obviously tons of other genres mixed in there, because we all love multiple genres. Yeah, we just love music in general. But that's the music I do with those guys, and I could just do more by myself, and it would probably sound just like a Sex Rollercoasters album, just maybe less more focused, because obviously I don't have the influence.
The whole band,
yeah, because
like Pete Townsend versus Pete Townsend's solo album versus the Who,
right?
You can tell it's like a Who type of thing, but it's like, okay, it's like when he just, like, it's like Behind Blue Eyes, like when he does a song that's just his voice,
right,
versus Roger Daltrey doing, like, is typically the voice of the Who,
right.
But if you have a whole album that's all Pete, then you get like a different level. It doesn't have the raw power to Daltrey guy.
Yeah. So I could just do more than that, but especially when I wrote that first album, I really wanted to do something. Like I said, I wasn't really trying to do chiptune. I was just trying to write music. I was at a point where, like, I didn't know what to do. So I just picked the sounds that I thought were the coolest. I just thought, like, hey, I grew up playing the Sega Genesis. I love a lot of those early soundtracks from that system. And I'm also a big fan of more modern soundtracks, both with video games and movies and stuff. So I just kind of mixed that. Obviously, you can hear my rock and roll influences, especially on this new album with like the drums and stuff.
Yeah, the drums. I love
very rock and roll drums.
Are you playing the drums?
Yes, they're drum samples, but I wanted to make sure that all the, like you said, I want to make sure that all of the instruments were real, or at least as real as they could be. So I got an electronic drum kit, and I made sure to play it. So there are samples, but I'm playing
like a Roland kit or any of those other kits. Like nowadays, you can actually have a really good electronic drum kit that actually sounds like a true drum kit.
Yeah. So they are samples from an actual performance that I just kind of chopped up, put in the drum, the electronic drums.
So you kind of tape spliced them. Yeah. Well, that's an old kind of progressive technique. I always watch music documentaries, and I was watching Peter Gabriel, like my, kind of a progressive guy.
Right.
And he had, like, on the Soul album, he had his drummer do like 100 takes of this track, like a 5-minute track. And then he took the tapes and then he said he did like a George Martin thing. He just started cutting them up. He's cut the physical tape up and then spliced it, just mixed it all up, just randomly mixed it. He
Right.
said, well, yeah, we're just gonna, you know, Peter Gabriel's a real progressive like rocker. He's like one of those guys, and he's like, I'm just gonna take all this and just mix it all around. And I think that's kind of cool when you take an approach that's kind of like coming out of left field or something. It's like, okay, like we could do something straight, or we could actually take something and then, you know, throw it around. It's kind of famous. I think Wilco did that with Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. They're kind of famous that they went and took like what Jeff Tweedy was doing and they totally like just ripped it up.
Right.
It kind of turned it into inside out. And yeah, I think because somebody come with an approach, it's like, well, I want to try something different. Yeah, maybe you were looking at the way the soft synths are today or the hardware synths, and you didn't hear what you wanted. So you came up like, well, I like this sound. And you went and found a way to make that sound.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I had a pretty strong vision for an opera of knives. So like I knew exactly what I wanted it to sound like by the time I was ready to record. So I knew I wanted those sort of like bigger sounding rock and roll drums. And you know, I went out and I bought a sample pack and played it.
That's cool. I mean, it's cool to know when you're a songwriter what your vision is. Like when you get into it, like I've written like rock operas.
Yeah.
Where like you know, it's kind of like a Tommy thing, like, you know, because I'm a big fan of Tommy and Quadrophenia and all those.
That's kind of what I was trying to do with this is you know, like each song kind of is like the next chapter of the story.
Yeah, I was going to kind of ask you, is this kind of like a Tommy or Quadrophenia in your mind? Is you trying to make it like that? Make it be a rock opera?
Yeah. So with both albums, I tried to make a story. You know, of course they're super interpretive because I never lyrically, I'm just not a really specific kind of guy. You're just supposed to kind of feel it and put yourself in that situation. But yeah, you know, 2020 and 2021 was a tough year for me and for everybody, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is just kind of like a rip out of my diary and just kind of putting.
But it's more of it's not like a tightly woven, like Tommy is a very clear story.
It's not story. That clear. But there is a plot and it moves forward.
It's kind of like people like say, well, potentially like Sgt. Pepper's is considered to be potentially a concept album, but there's really no concept, right? There's just a bunch of songs that go together, but you'd be hard pressed to say what is the story, right? But it feels like it's some kind of theme, but you can't pin it down. It's like whatever you feel it is. It's like peace and love or psychedelia or whatever, but it feels like it's something, but you can't define it. And then later in the 70s, that becomes like the roadmap. Oh, we could take that and actually make it mean like what Pink Floyd does,
retroactively,
like what you know, the Quadrophenia was, or what Queen ended up doing with A Night at the Opera. I mean, people can say, "Oh, yeah, I can actually take that kind of idea and actually make it mean something," or I could keep it psychedelic and like, you know, sometimes with the Yes songs, you're like, it's a theme, but what does it mean? You know,
this hopefully, because like I said, you know, it's up to the listener, but this one is supposed to be a little bit tighter than that. You know, there are characters being I'm always referring to either you or me, or there's this third character that I refer to who's called the Lurker in the shadows, and I refer to him a couple times. And then, you know, I like I said, you know, I love scores, just particularly in video games, but in movies and stuff. And I took a lot of those ideas while I was like orchestrating this album. I'm using a lot of leitmotifs and reorchestrating them in different songs to kind of like move the plot along. So not only are there like lyrical characters, but they're also like musical characters, I guess, because the music is saying the same phrase in a lot of the songs, if not everyone. But it's evolving in key, in tone, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love that kind of thing because like a lot of people, you listen to like Genesis Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. There's a lot of themes in it, but it's kind of like there's like real, and they're like, oh, like what does that mean? It's like, but you can kind of feel, because Peter was kind of like, I don't want it to be super clear because I want people to kind of interpret it.
Right, exactly.
And so you can either spell it out, like Townsend wants to spell it out because that's his style. So he kind of makes it real clear. Okay, Tommy, I know who Tommy's about, and I can figure it out. But like it, I think it is more interesting sometimes if you come with like, I got this lurker. Like, okay, ooh, what does that mean? Because then
Right.
it's like when you're a novelist, if you create this kind of mystery and you're not so clear, I think it's like when you're doing a movie. Like if you have a Hitchcock movie, and one of the best things about it is like I can't really figure it out until I get maybe all the way to the end.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know?
and I kind of tried to do that, because the whole album is very, very melodramatic. It's supposed to be huge and whatever. But like right off the bat in song one, I'm introducing you to the main theme within seconds, and then of course it devolves into some other song. But yeah, like I said, I could spell out to you exactly my intentions, but I would much rather you interpret it and kind of come up with whatever
Yeah.
you think is going on.
I think that's always good, because if you listen to fans, like they always misinterpret the lyrics from songs.
Yeah,
You
but
have people
I'm
come
just
up,
saying do that on purpose.
no, but it's kind of cool. I think because everybody kind of, to me, I think in terms of sound paintings, right? So when I listen to something, it brings up an image to me, and I think that's like the one thing about when you're a songwriter is like you could have like a general theme that you're trying to convey, but how your fans interpret it is their own personal interpretation.
Sure.
And I think it is kind of cool when you leave it, like if you create a music video and you step it out to be exactly what you want that song to mean,
Right.
and you kind of take away that, compared to like if you make it very psychedelic and it really doesn't seem to match, then people can still have their own interpretation.
Right.
But if you turn it into like a really clear storyline, then
Yeah.
you're like, oh well, then you took it away from them.
Like I said, I could spell it out, but there aren't really too much vocals in the album. I use them just kind of like an instrument. There's, in the
Yeah,
song
it's
that
kind
we
of like
listened to,
jazz. It's
the
kind of
title.
like Coltrane. Like you just
Yeah,
break the line, you know.
just a little spice of vocals.
Well, I think it's cool because I listened to a band called Sun Ra, a jazz band, right? And they're famous for just doing like lines like "Space is the place,"
Hmm.
or they would, or like they're very much like Coltrane, where they'll have lyrics in their jazz, in their fusion, and their bebop, but it's only a couple lines, and they'll have like a theme. And their famous one is like "Space is the place," because it's kind of sci-fi bebop, and
Sure.
you're like, and you get this idea that like, what, these cosmic brothers, they're writing this jazz, and it's like, oh, we're going out into space, we're traveling the spaceways, but it doesn't really go into like, okay, what are you doing out there? No,
Right.
it's just like a chant.
You're just supposed to
You know,
feel it. Yeah.
you feel it, and it's kind of cool when you just do very sparse lyrics like that. That you can kind of put a little bit of a feeling, and then leave it open, and then you can still try and direct a little bit of a theme. It's like, okay, we're talking about space.
Yeah.
We're talking about the interstellar ways, and then like, but then you can kind of fill it in to what you think where we're going.
Yeah, in the first song, like I said, right off the bat, I introduced the musical themes of the song, and then I got a couple lyrics in there that kind of like pose the question, like, what is this album about? And then we got a couple more songs, and then if you listen to the last song, the lyrics are the same as they are in the first one, but there's a little bit more to
So you get
kind of
like
like
a common
bookend it.
theme. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's kind of like a Love Supreme. Because if you listen to the suite of Love Supreme, like you'll hear it multiple times. It comes in because that's the theme. And
right,
same thing with like Space is the place. It'll come, it'll be Space is the place. It will come in a couple of times, and then it might talk about interstellar ways and other things in the cosmos, but it doesn't really deviate. But it'll come back to a central theme, which is typical jazz. Is
right,
it'll go off and then come back and go off, come back, go off.
right.
But it's kind of concept stuff. When you get into fusion and bebop, some of it is very conceptual in terms of the thematic use of things. But yeah, I think it's cool when you can take those kind of ideas and put them into other genres. Which is like, I think that's what the cool thing about this age right now is the ability that you can mix country, you can mix funk, you can take classical, psychedelic, and EDM, You can get people who say, well, I don't really want it to be EDM. It's like, well, what happens if you mix it with trap? What
Right.
happens if you do? Why not? Like, why do you have to have the drop here? Like,
Sure.
why
I
can't you
mean,
just
you can jump on the train, or you can try to get ahead of the curve
change it?
and make your own train, get your own track.
Yeah.
Yeah, I for Opera Knives, I wasn't really trying to do anything in particular. I just had an idea, and I was just like, okay, let's throw all the stuff that I can do at it. I wanted an orchestral album. I wanted a chiptune album, but I also wanted it to be a rock opera. So why not all of those?
Well, I think that's the whole nature of what I call like expansive sound, which is I associate with like my brand, but I've always tried to tell people like expansive sound doesn't just have to be Phantom.
Sure.
Like anybody that's like thinking in that terms is like, I think that's where all musicians want to go. Is they say, you talk to a lot of musicians, they'll say, well, I don't want to get pinned down. That
Yeah.
I'm indie rock or malt rock or I'm this and that. So you say you're expansive. What does that mean? Well, that means we can do anything. You can do everything.
Yeah, that's something I always struggled with. Even with Sex Roller Coasters, we struggle with that. Is that we don't really know what to call ourselves. Like with Sex Roller Coasters, we've settled on pop punk because we're really high energy and most things are distorted. But we do a lot of psychedelic stuff. We do a lot of funk stuff. We do a lot of pop.
Yeah, you guys are expansive.
Yeah, and same thing with this. Like, I guess you could call it chiptune because I'm using chiptune hardware, and that's kind of like the lane that I've been advertising in. Which is, like I said, the community
Well,
is
it gets you
wonderful.
into the kind of marketing world. You kind of got a pin where's the biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah,
Your core audience. But yeah, I mean, I think like a progressive synthesis, like a synth wave artist was like, whoa, I like, because a lot of us synthesis we like chiptune, you know,
yeah,
and even though I'm not a chiptune artist, I can respect it. I
sure,
mean,
yeah,
there's
it's
actually hardware synths being built to actually do chiptune.
right.
Um, and so like in a lot of guys who want, who are synthesis, they want, we don't just want like in our arsenal a mini Moog. Sometimes we're looking for that edge, and like a chiptune like machine is like, oh, they give me like a different angle.
Right.
And not that I would have the whole album that, but like to bring that flavor in. It's like I would think if you're a guitar player, right? I was listening to some guy who was saying like when you mix guitars, it's like this orchestra of guitars. Like when you do an album, a lot of times you'll do different tunings, different guitars, different effects
Oh,
coming from
sure.
different channels.
All
And
layers.
and synthesis do the same thing. It's like we might have our big Moog bass, but then we'll have a Prophet 5 because it can sit in the mix,
Right.
or an
Yeah. Right on top.
Oberheim, or a D50 because what the D50 can do, or a DX7. Even going into like the organs like Hammond B3s, and just all kinds of electric pianos. Everything has like a different tone, and you want to sit it in the mix
Sure.
in
Yeah.
different ways, right? So when you hear something like a chip tune, it's like, well, I could take a Moog and have a chip tune come in, or maybe have like a D50, and all these things could have like a layering effect, like in the idea of like a sound painting.
Sure.
So this like depends on what degree you put what in the mix. You can have this picture and a sound picture that can convey what you're feeling as the writer.
The cool thing about chiptune is that because it's so rudimentary, like these, especially the older machines, they had to be made affordable for you able to buy and to play, and you want to buy all the games and stuff. So those sound chips are really rudimentary. They're very very
Super basic.
yeah, and that gives you constraints. That gives you sort of like a small confinement that you have to work in. And I think working with little breeds a ton of creativity because you have to learn like, oh, I want a big drum fill at this part, but I only have 4 channels to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe now I'm putting the bass on the offbeat because on the downbeat I need that bass drum sound. And
Yeah,
there's just not enough channels to make noise.
but it's kind of like the whole point of like some of the old monophonic analog stuff was like you only could do so much, right? So
Yeah.
you had to like, well, how am I going to fit this into the mix? And the limitation is like, what was like, why would you like, you can use all these new synths that have tons of layers of effects and like 32 LFOs, but you might go and just use a mini Moog, or you might use a mini Korg, which is like only monophonic, maybe only has one LFO, because there's something about that simple sound, just using the square wave or just using the triangle or only having one LFO. And the limitation of using that sometimes actually can cause you to do things that if you have like all the LFOs in the world and all the mod matrices, that you go maybe too far with all these things happening in the sound, and then it's like it becomes like, okay, well, I want to get more basic.
Right.
And if you go down to the basic roots and get like a very simple synth, you can do really cool wide open demo kind of stuff. I always kind of point out, like I think about Prince, like in Dirty Mind, it sounds like a demo, and it has a lot of appeal because he didn't layer it, because he kept it simple.
Right.
And there's a lot of Prince music that's like that. There's like Warner's used to get after him and say, this song ain't finished. And he would like, yeah, it is, because that's what it is. You know, and it's hard because people were like, well, it doesn't sound finished, but that's the point.
Yeah. And that's something I struggle with. Like I said, you know, it all started on the Game Boy, but I started putting in the drums, the trumpets, the violins, cellos, blah, blah, blah. And I noticed that like the bigger it got, the more like the less appealing it was. So like for this album, I did a ton of like recording and then like carving out
stripping
bits.
Things out.
Yeah. So just to get it, you know, I recorded a ton of flute, but it's only ever used in the first song because I wound up like most of that was just taken up by like violins and stuff, and I just wound up never using it again.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing when you're a musician. Sometimes I like to like I'll be like in a session, and I like that day I thought this was cool.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, I'm stop. Go back 2 days later and then listen to it. Like, nah, I should pull that out.
Yeah.
And I go in, there's like
did a ton of that.
The day I did it, I was like, I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
I can listen to it. It's like, nah, that's not good.
Yeah, because you know you got a cake and you keep putting frosting on it because you think it's going to make it better, but eventually, you know, it's too sweet to eat, so you got to like wipe.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes
off.
it's just like if you take like just a Moog bass, right, and then some weird like sample, and it's very sparse. And I was just playing with like I have this sampler, like a Morphogene sampler, which is like Eurorack sampler, and the cool thing about it is that you can control it with CV. So you can take a sample and then you cut it up by running it through all kinds of subtractive synthesis.
Sure.
And so that in itself can create like a rhythm. And you can use it instead of a drum. And so then I was using like, okay, I'm going to experiment with using that as the rhythmic track and then let's do a Moog bass line. Then I went and threw like a bunch of pads on it. And I'm like, came back and I was like, I don't need these pads. And dropped the pads out and just kept it sparse and then kind of scattered, wrapped over it, and it felt way better without the pads.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes that stuff can be distracting, and you kind of just want to focus on the main element or the main ingredient.
Groove, you don't want to bury the groove with all the pads. And
exactly.
All the orchestration. So you kind of like, it's like I think as you get more experience as a musician, you start to realize where you can taken away is sometimes better.
Yeah, it's so hard though, because you become attached to all the cool stuff you did, and then you're like, okay, well, that's not beneficial to the track.
Sometimes I think it takes some maturity to actually cut things.
It's tough.
I was like, when I was like 19, I was like I'm not cutting nothing.
Yeah, my baby.
I was like, I'm not cutting anything.
Yeah, but then you just wind up with like, you know, the wave files just like a big sausage, and it just sounds like a wall of sound.
There's too much wall. I mean, sometimes you want the Phil Spector thing. Sometimes you want, you know, you want
for
that
effect, but not like your whole record.
Sometimes you don't need to have like it sounded like Bruce Springsteen. You know, you don't need that. Sometimes you want the Dirty Mind. You know, sometimes you want Kiss. If you really think about it, because that is the fact that they put it out is still rare because they did not want to put it out. I read all these like stuff, all this, but I'm a real Prince fanatic, and Warner's really didn't like Kiss.
Hmm.
They thought it was like not good at all, and they're like, this thing is not ready for prime time. But that kind of shows you, like,
Yeah,
like if you're an artist, sometimes you got to really stick by your guns.
yeah.
Because like if they haven't heard it, that's a big problem in our industry. Like there's so much wanting to clone.
Yeah, because that's guaranteed money, and that's
Yeah.
what they're trying to do is run a business.
Yeah, but I think it's like as artists, we always have a tendency to kind of tick off management because like we'll go do something, and then they want us to keep on doing like Hotel California like over and over.
Yeah, like no, I want to do other stuff.
Yeah, you get your one big hit, and then they want you to just clone that for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
and
especially
and then,
because new stuff keeps happening. That's cool. So like you want to take new inspirations. You don't want to just be making music from the 90s for 20 years. You want to make 2020s music in the 2020s.
Yeah, I mean, because I think it's weird because I kind of go back because I have a punk aesthetic in my music. Like
Sure,
I'm a frustrated guitar player. I'm a synthesist that wants my synth to sound like guitar.
Sure.
And so I try to do that a lot. But I love bands like Who's Do and the Replacements. Like I listen to like Joy Division and like early New Order, and I like the guitar. Guitar is kind of like in new wave. I kind of a lot of times I'll focus on what the guitar sounds like in new wave songs, not the synth, because people always think about new wave as just all synth, but early new wave and new romantic songs have a lot of guitar.
Sure.
A lot of drum, a lot of kind of funky kind of guts to the songs. And that was always interesting to me because the people just, it was just a bunch of pads. It's like, no, there's a lot more than that. So it's interesting as you develop as a musician, just to figure out like what you're gonna dive into or try to bring back, because sometimes it feels like today in rock that there needs to be some kind of reinvigoration.
Sure.
Kind of like when Kurt came on the scene, Kurt Cobain. It just seems like we need another kind of like jab in the side. Somebody needs to kind of come and hit the scene.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know about the radio stations out your way, but out here, a lot of the rock and roll stations are kind of playing like sort of alternative electronic music in its place, like very guitar, drum and bass driven, but like lots of samples, lots of like that sort of just written in that sort of modern loop sample mentality.
Yeah, it's kind of industrial, kind of heavy, dark wave, kind of like not EDM, but like psytrance. There's a lot of interesting things going on. But I've always been a big fan, like the Paul Westerbergs of the world, and bands like like I said, like Who's Do, and I just love it when somebody can come and be like that, the honesty of that kind of punk. It's like when you hear Grant Hart or Bob Mould just being kind of raw and just saying what they felt.
Sure.
And not doing like love songs, but it's like really personal type of songs. And there's something about when you can do that, like a Westerberg or a Bob Mould, or even like Joey Ramone. It's like that. There's something about that. Even like Deborah Harry, and if you think about Blondie, I mean, there's something. I really get into that kind of songcraft, and I'm kind of missing it. Maybe because I grew up from that time period, but I'm like, it's like, where's the next band like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're moving upward. But rock and roll will stick around, just like all genres.
We always get surprised because I didn't see Kurt Cobain coming. I didn't see when Guns N' Roses came, because they were kind of like a response to a lot of the hair metal bands, and they were like they were like the Stones. Because like we had a lot of hair metal. Maybe we had like Def Leppard. They were kind of like, oh, they're like our Zeppelin. They're kind of trying to do it. And then GNR is like, wow, oh, they're actually doing it.
Right.
And Yeah, so there's always going to be somebody comes along, like another Pearl Jam or another Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots or something like that. But yeah, I know in the underground, I'm always looking for them.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah,
You
I
just
was talking to
gotta
you guys because
catch the right break.
I think at Sex With Rollercoasters, you guys in that kind of space to me. But so I'm looking forward. Did you guys planning to try to, like, when things get back to a certain
Yeah,
steady nature, that you're going to continue?
our lives are all over the place right now, and we're all kind of doing
Your own thing.
individual stuff. But as soon as we get a grasp of the reins there a little bit, we'll be back to making music.
Yeah, because I like you. I love, we've been doing a couple of things, and I think I invited you, but I don't know if you're uh, able to. But we started to do this thing called the PEG Bedroom Producer Festival, and we did it in July. And we actually had, because of the lockdowns, we did an online producer festival. We called it the PEG Bedroom Producer Festival. We did it from the 16th of July to the 18th, and podcast guests. We had 22 podcast guests that had been on the show, played 20, 30-minute sets from wherever they were.
Cool.
So if they were in their basement or in their garage or on a sound studio, depending where they were in the world, they did a performance. And so we're doing it again in February, from February 11th to the 13th, and we invite anybody who's been on the show. If you want to do like an unplugged show, if you want to do a video, we had some bands that just did videos and then sent us the video, and then some bands
Cool.
actually played live from their bedroom studio, however they wanted to do it, and
Right
we
on.
did it. So it's an open invitation if you can find a way to do it. We actually rehearsed everybody and show them what to do. But we just have a way to do that.
For this project, I didn't really write it in a way knowing that I would play it live. So I have no idea how I would do that. But I have been, secretly doing some research to hopefully put some shows together and do a little something.
That's
so
cool.
I will let you know.
If you happen to be available, we are booking for that time period. It's a weekend. The 11th through the 13th is like a Friday to a Sunday.
For sure.
We're running from like 7 in the morning to 11 at night. And we've got it like almost half booked. But if you find a way that you could do some kind of cool live performance, and what we say, people can kind of just do what they think is cool. I kind of just do a jam. And I just, that's what I do a lot.
That's kind of what I'm working on. I'm looking into a lot of like sampler stuff, and I was just thinking about like live remixing some of my songs, slapping them together.
Doing like some kind of controller to kind of clip it.
I've been looking at all sorts of sampler groove box things to see which one best fits.
There's a lot of cool. Yeah, I mean, my force kind of fits the bill. It does everything I've been wanting to do. It does what the MPC does, but then I can actually play it.
Yeah.
Given the kind of guy I am, I just don't want to run the clip. I actually want to.
Yeah, no, I want to perform, but also I don't want to hurt my pockets. So
no. And there's all kinds of cool machines out there that started showing up. I mean, I think even Roland brought their 707 back.
Yeah,
the MC 707, and I'm not pushing anything, but that 707 was a cool machine back in the day. And the new version of it is pretty cool. But there's MPCs, there's all kinds of controllers from everybody. Novation's got control. Everybody's got a controller.
I was looking at the Novation Circuit Rhythm.
That's a good machine. It's very similar to my Force. It's kind of like the same thing, but it's probably cheaper.
I have tons of friends who use the SP404.
And the new one came out. The brand new one, which is crazy. But the 404 is the standard. I've seen like Joji. If you ever seen Japanese artist Joji, he uses the SP404 real heavy.
Yeah. So that's kind of the place I'm looking for.
Yeah, he actually went to a club when he did an album release, and he used it to do like almost every song from his record live. That's awesome. And I was like, I've never really used it. I understand how it works, but it's really cool to actually see him do it, and he was actually able to kind of DJ himself.
That's what I'm hoping to do.
That is a cool thing. I love artists that do that, because I think it's really interesting. Like because I'm a single, like one person operation.
It's tough doing it by yourself.
And I've kind of depended on sequencers. Like I'm heavily depending on like analog and digital sequencers and then foot pedals, and that's how I do what I do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've never had like a all-in-one solution until I got this Force. But yeah, like what I used to do is just like control the clock from multiple things with like CV,
Sure.
and then kick things off with pedals, and I
Right.
kind of just like forced it. But because I just like I wanted to do it, and I didn't have the money to do other things, so I took the equipment I had and kind of jury rigged it to do what I wanted.
Yeah, that's gonna be me.
But I think it's cool if you do that. Then you end up with like your own workflow that's like you.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
and then you're comfortable with it because you know how it works. And whether anybody else knows how to work, it doesn't matter. It's like as long as you can do it.
Right.
Yeah, that's my whole point. Is like if you're comfortable with it, it doesn't matter if that's like not the standard thing. It's like, if it works for you, it works for you.
Absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate that you came on the show. I think it's interesting to see what you're doing today. I'm glad that you're still out here doing work and doing art, because like today, sometimes some of the people I've talked to in the past, they've not been able to continue, and it's awesome to see that you're still doing it.
Sure.
Yeah, and like I think I told you, like if any of the other guys in the band want to come on, like I'm open to having everybody come do whatever.
Absolutely.
show.
I'm sure you'll have us all back soon.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, thank you for being on the show. This will be out there on Spotify within like an hour or two, and we'll send you the YouTube, your Facebook, and Twitch links that are live. There'll be the permanent version, so you can send it to your friends and stuff. And we could actually send you an MP3 and MP4 if you want to take cuts of this and promote it however you want.
That would be cool. Thank you.
We'll send it to your like WeTransfer type of thing. But
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk to you later. And anytime you have anything new that you're pushing, always get in touch with us. We always like to stay in touch with the artists we talk to.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much. Steven Bupp. Make sure you hit the link, download, favorite, subscribe, playlist, do everything you can.
Please.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good one.